Chapter 10. Simon suggested that they spend Easter in Paris. His uncle Rupert owned them. He meant that they could use while he was away holidaying in Guadeloupe. Cern would take his girlfriend, Nina, and Theo could take Vanessa. Theo liked the idea but doubted whether Vanessa's father would let her spend a week away. If raw home in the company of men, he need not have worried. English fathers, do they not as strict as their Nigerian counterparts, or their daughters more cunning? The apartment was located in the fashionable 9th arrondissement, close to the Place de la Madeleine, in an affluent area of the city where women wearing furs and carrying miniature dogs strolled the place Vendôme and Champs Élysées. The women amused Theo, for he could tell that being seen was just as important to them, if not more important, than what they purchased. What would it be like, he wondered, to sit and watch their comings and goings? And what would his mother make of them? But he and Vanessa never stayed long. Enough to observe and, except for a visit to the opera and an evening of coffees and mulfis at the Café de la Paix, they spent little time in the Louvre. Instead, for the first few days, they walked through the Jardin des Tuileries onto the Seine and over to the left bank, which was Vanessa's favorite part of the city. Paris was a place Vanessa knew well, as she had visited it many times as a child, and on their walks she recounted for his benefit its history, explaining to him the origin of the Ile de la Cité and the distinctive architectures along there. Seine. It was Theo's first visit, and each day he found himself newly impressed by its beauty. It made him want to travel to as many European countries as possible before returning to Nigeria, and especially to Vienna, Prague, and Amsterdam. In a strange sort of way, Paris reminded Theo of Nigeria, even though in its appearance it was quite different from anything back home. The buildings were old, the diet rich in dairy products, and the climate cool, but in its feel there was definitely something reminiscent of home. It might have been the bustle, their incessant talking, and the way people argued openly and loudly on the streets. The bureaucracy was also excessive, like home, and there were many Africans, French-speaking ones. Vanessa had bought him his first writing journal to record his thoughts, which he began doing on their first day. Today I can't stop smiling. I imagine walking with you forever, hand in hand, strolling through the Jardins de Luxembourg. It seems like we could laugh and talk, and never run out of things to say. This afternoon, as we sipped our cafés au lait at Les Dermagats, and as you charmed the propriétaire with your fluent French, I watched you with such pride. I love you, Vanessa, so much that I think of nothing else. Tomorrow we will visit new places, but it hardly matters where we go. Just to be with you is heaven. The next day, however, was not so romantic, for while he and Vanessa were out on the streets of Montmartre, a Congolese man approached them and asked to take a photograph. I'll make a beautiful picture. You give me your address, mademoiselle, and I send it to you. Rubbish, Theo thought. It was obvious that the man had other intentions. And yet Vanessa gave him her address. Theo was quiet for the rest of that afternoon, and doubly annoyed because Vanessa could not see for herself what was bothering him. It grew into a long simmering argument that lasted all and was only resolved the following morning as they walked to the Sorbonne down the Rue des Écoles, in search of Présence Africaine, a tiny bookshop filled with books by African and Caribbean authors. Theo thought, not for FRST time, about Christine and how much she would have liked the place. Out of guilt, he bought her a copy of the Présence Africaine Review with special essays in tribute to Malcolm X. He also bought some work by James Baldwin, which he and Vanessa read together on a park bench nearby. And this was the pattern of each of their days, long stretches spent wandering Paris followed by evenings with Simon and Nina. They lived the bohemian life, eating baguettes with brie and saucisson, and drinking red wine as they debated world politics. They spoke frequently of America, Malcolm's tragic death, and Vietnam. Vanessa and Simon argued vehemently against intervention while he and Nina played devil's advocate. On the final night they talked for hours on the subject of society and who was best placed to critique it. Vanessa suggested that only those who had traveled away from home could really see their countries for what they were, which led to a long discussion of Herodotus and de Tocqueville. Theo wondered how he would perceive Nigeria once he returned. Would he see things more clearly? And what, as a foreigner, were his thoughts on England? What insights might he have to offer? The next morning, their last full day in France, they were to visit Versailles and were packing a picnic. They were almost ready to leave when the telegram arrived. Christine was dead. Suicide. It had been an overdose and the body was found only several days later by the cleaning lady. Ike was the one who gave Theo the details over the phone, telling him that relatives had come immediately to take the body away and clear out her room. Why did she do this? Ike kept asking. Theo did what he could to reassure him, telling him that these were questions no one could answer, but inside he asked the same questions and more. Everyone believed that things between him and Christine had ended long ago, but, in reality, it had been only a few weeks since Theo had stopped visiting her. She had sent him several notes that he had chosen to do nothing about, and now he felt devastated. Even though there was nothing in the notes to suggest desperation, Theo felt that had he responded to them properly, the suicide wouldn't have happened. She had told him so many times that she felt caught between two lands, never fully belonging to England or Nigeria, but he had never taken it seriously, always thinking that she was the strong and privileged one. But now he could see it clearly. The peripatetic lifestyle contributing to her anxieties at Oxford and amplifying her desire to please her family with academic success. But the taking of her life? How could she have done this? Why hadn't she talked to someone? And how, had they all failed to realize the depth of her despair? He asked himself why he had not been honest enough to tell her that he, wasn't ready for a serious relationship, instead of making up excuses he knew she hadn't believed anyway. Why hadn't he been more of a man and told her that he had once loved her, for God's sake? And now he was caught up in an other web of untruths. He had lied to Vanessa about Christine. Theo clasped his hands tightly behind his neck and pulled his head down to his knees. He still had her notes to him, but he couldn't bring himself to reread them, yet the phrases were branded in his mind. Bole I tells us you are busy with your new girl. Please, spare a few moments for your old friend. The notes were sitting on his desk, and, next to them the journals that had got for Christine in Paris. He flicked through them, tears welling in his eyes as he realized that she might have already been dead when he bought them. And then he thought of Vanessa, who would by now be back in France for the summer. How patient she'd been as he grieved for Christine. She's not what you think, he found himself mumbling as though Christine were with him. Vanessa's not just any white woman. He was supposed to be packing his things to spend the summer with his cousin in Bradford. a trip he had planned months before, but he couldn't bring himself to start. Instead, he sat before his empty trunk viewing for Christine, missing Vanessa, and staring at the Nigerian newspaper cutting sent by his father. Christine Arins died of sudden illness while studying abroad. Oxford Ivers Ty, may her soul rest in peace. April 4, 1965. Rest in peace, Teo whispered.